Roy, thank you so much for doing this again. This, for those listening or watching, this is part two of a series we're doing with Scott. Scott, I would recommend that you listen to the first episode where we talked at length about some of the revenue building aspects, in particular the DQ selling approach, as well as the race equation. So if that you hear those concepts mentioned again, it would be well worth listening to the first episode so you have some sort of bearing as we get stuck into this conversation. Scott, you started with an Roy partnership quite some time ago, having worked in a whole range of organizations, both in the for-profit and non-profit space. When you started with an Roy partnership, I would imagine there's still a bit of grunt work to be done in terms of getting that credibility in the marketplace and getting people used to the fact that you now
Mm,
have a new program or offer to put in front of them, and that there is a degree of
mhm.
trust and credibility to build up, as it were. How did you approach it back then? And looking back in hindsight, is there anything you would have changed in your approach?
That's a really great reflection and astute of you to see that when you start a new
Mm,
business, how do you get started? How do you start from scratch? And when we started our business in 2008, Roy Witten, who's my business partner, is retired now. We were a couple of older guys. I was in my early 50s and Roy was in his early 60s. I think I was 50, 51. And I was 51. Roy was 61. And we were two Americans
mm,
living in London, okay? And it's not like we had a lot of friends or a lot of people that we knew. We knew some people, but we didn't know a lot of people. Each of us had been working for another consulting firm, and you don't take that consulting
mm.
firm's business away from them because that's not ethical, and you can also get sued for that. So we were just basically saying, okay, how do we want to do this? And so we decided from the very beginning that we didn't want to work that hard. A couple of older guys who had done pretty well in what we'd done before, each in our own right. And so we had a vision of working about 100 days a year, 100 billable days a year, each person. And we wanted to work in pair. We didn't want to work on our own. And the rest of the time was either going to be with a family or playing golf. So we, unfortunately, because we got started and we found clients fairly quickly, that our demands on our time just kept decreasing. And our vision of playing golf disappeared, and our vision of not building a business with other people in it disappeared. And so now today, here we wake up, we've got 50 consultants around the world, and we operate a global business. And I say we very loosely because Roy is no longer involved in the business direct. But to answer your question specifically is how did we get started? And we did have some friends, and so we went to them and got some referrals and recommendations from them, just a few. But one of our first clients ever was an organization called Metro Safety here in London. And then we got another client with just a small coaching contract with British, just literally a 10,000 pound contract. That was it. And what's interesting about both of those customers or those clients is that one came through a personal connection and the other one came through literally just a social interaction. Okay. And where trust, I think, begins is why should we trust you guys to help us, especially when you don't have any sort of track record except your own track record of Roy had his track record. I had my track record in doing what we had done before. But it comes down to how people perceive you and how you act toward them. So oftentimes what people will say, "Oh, you're in consulting. Okay, tell me what you do or tell me how you could help me." And that's an invitation, a fisherman with a very beautiful lure that hooks a fish. It's one of those things where it's very easy to get hooked as a consultant to get into your
Yeah.
pitch, into who you are, what you do, and why you do it. And instead, the answer to that is, I'm not sure how I could help you or if I can even help you. But I could certainly listen to what the challenge is that you're having, and then we could have a conversation about that. How about we start there? And so just immediately from the get-go, it's what's the challenge you're trying to solve? What's the problem you're facing that you are having a struggle with? And then staying on that problem and continuing to peel that open over and over again, so that during, let's say, a 45-minute or an hour-long conversation, I'm listening probably
Hmm.
45 minutes of that. And my interactions back to the client or potential client is literally just playing back to them what they've told
Right.
me. So it might sound something like this. I'd say, whoa, so what you're saying, Vinay, is da 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 da. And I summarize what they've said using some of their key words. And it's a way for me to check, did I hear
Hmm.
them correctly? Did I hear what they said? Did I capture it properly? Or did I miss something? And on their side, it's they're able to hear, wow, did he hear me correctly? And wow, he heard all of that correctly except one thing,
Hmm.
and I'm going to correct him here. So that would be the internal dialogue. So it might be, oh no, you missed one thing, and that is, I see. So what you're saying is da 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 da. Yes, that's exactly it. Okay, great. Tell me more about that.
Hmm.
You say, and then more comes out. And so by the end of a 1 hour conversation, I have notes. In fact, I take my notes in a very specific way. I'll take a piece of paper, and I don't rely on AI to do that. I
Yep.
need to do it for myself, not AI. Whenever the AI note taker comes up, I pretty much just shut it off every time, because I don't think it really helps build trust if I'm on a Zoom call or I'm using some Teams or whatever. I don't think it builds trust because everything
Hmm.
that's being said is being recorded. So, that's just a small thing, right? That's a little thing, but it's a big thing, right? I want them to speak freely with me. And so on that piece of paper, I literally take a sheet of paper and I draw a line 2/3 of the way across the paper on a vertical line. And everything that they say, all the data of what they say, I'll write very brief notes,
Hmm.
just words, a few words here and there about what they've said. And then the human mind is so fast and we love figuring things out as human beings. So what we want to do, or what I do, is I just start writing down stuff that occurs to me,
Hmm.
questions I have about, or comments I have, or thoughts I have, or whatever. It just pops in my mind. And the mistake that most people make when they're interacting with somebody for the first time or a second or third or fourth time is they get really curious about what's been said. And so then they start asking their stuff that's on the right side of the
Hmm.
column, on the right column. And what we do is we have the discipline of not doing that,
Hmm.
not at this time. There'll be a time later in the conversation where I'll come back to that, but I want to give my potential client the opportunity to find their way and to tell me their story as they want to tell it. And it may feel a bit flabby and all this kind of stuff, but it's what's on their mind. And I'm playing back to them what they've said, and then they tell me more. And oftentimes, eventually, the stuff that I had questions about in the right column, they get to during the narrative that they're going through. And so I just scratch it out. Or I'm glad I didn't ask that question. And so it's not just the practical side of getting them to tell me the story, but it's what happens when people are listened to very carefully. If I can tell you what you've told me, then you know that I've listened to you. And that builds trust. If I'm playing back to you what you've said to me, what happens is you have to think more deeply about what you've told me. Because sometimes, have you ever had it where somebody plays something back to you and you go, it's not exactly
Hmm.
that, it's this. I know I told you that, but actually it's this instead. It's a little bit different than
Hmm.
what I said before. So the method itself is based on Rogerian therapy. Okay. Carl Rogers, one of the great psychologists, one of the top 3 psychologists in history, as most people think, Jung, Freud, and Carl Rogers, these seminal moments in history where they bring a technique or an observation. And what Rogers believed was that if I could just get a person to talk about their situation, they will pretty much be able to figure things out for themselves. But I just got to get them to talk. So he would have people sit down and he would say, tell me what you're hearing about today. And then they would respond to that. And then he would then play it back to them, and then they would say more, and very few questions ever used in this method. So the whole thing about you need to have your questioning funnel and you need to guide people to a certain, that's all bullshit. Pardon me, but it's all bull. It's not all bull. It is a technique, but it's a restrictive technique. It doesn't create opportunities with people to build trust. It doesn't create larger opportunities than what the presenting opportunity is. The method we're talking about is, yeah, I've got a problem, but actually the problem is much bigger than I thought it was
Uh-huh.
because you helped me think more clearly about it. And so now maybe we need to expand the scope of work that we're actually
Hmm.
looking to do. Okay. So I'll stop there for a second, just give you a chance to reflect back on that. And it's just the manner in which that
Sure.
initial.
You're essentially, if I understand this correctly, from day dot of the partnership kicking off, you've pretty much been using the DQ selling approach to build credibility and trust with your potential clients, and the story has evolved from there. Looking back,
Yeah.
is there anything that you would have changed in your approach in those early days?
I don't think so. I mean,
Hmm.
we made a decision early on that we wanted to create close personal relationships with our clients. And we had that opportunity to do that because both Roy and I had our own
Hmm.
successes early in our careers, and we had money to be able to take our time. Now,
Yep.
not everybody has that luxury, right? And so we didn't find ourselves getting caught up in the cold lead and chasing lots and lots of leads. We were able to work our way into a
Right.
warm market, and that warm market was either
Hmm.
through people that we knew, which was just very few, actually. Just getting that. Actually, I think we only had one, maybe two clients that
Mm.
came from people that we knew. But then once we had that, then those
Right.
people knew people, and because of the quality of our work and our relationship and the trust that we built with that client, they
Mm.
referred us on to other people who
Yep.
bought our work. And that's true both in the commercial sector that we worked here in London and also in the developing world where most of our work is done there now because that's where we want to make an impact. But it's been largely word of mouth or meeting people through conferences and this kind
Mm.
of thing where you meet somebody and you make a connection. And sometimes we've had people who've been the CEO of one company and they move to another company and then they call us up and say, we need to get you over here. And then sometimes it's just a referral, say, hey, I've got a friend who's now the CEO of such, and I told him
Mm.
about you and his name, number, all this kind of thing. So that's how we've largely pursued the growth of our company. And I
Okay.
wouldn't have changed any of that. But in some cases, people do have to
Mhm.
go to cold methods simply because.
So, with trust being central to your approach, when you think about trust in business relationships, what would you say it reveals about the character of the person building it? Because I'm curious about the heart behind the methodology, not just the methodology in itself.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you for saying that because actually we say this to our clients all the time. We're teaching you technique, but it's the purpose you have behind the technique that will make it either come
Mm.
off as phony or that it actually is sincere and genuine. And we genuinely have, and because we're still doing this, we have a deep curiosity about what is the challenge that this client is facing. We're not just
Mm.
trying to sell them consulting services. We're not just trying to sell them training. We really want to understand what the problem is and understand who we're talking to and then who else is involved on the other side. And that curiosity that I can't genuinely help you or help you make a really good decision unless I really show interest in what you're doing. I really can't help you unless I understand you. And I
Mm.
really want to help you if I can. So that's what stands behind the technique. Otherwise, it
Mm.
just comes off as a
You
technique.
mentioned Carl Rogers' principles, and I'm wondering, in your experience, when, say, a salesperson is truly listening to understand rather than listening to respond, what vulnerable qualities must they develop within themselves? Because in my experience, I've found that you can't really give what you don't have.
Yeah. Part of it is you as a person being willing to reveal yourself. And that comes oftentimes
Mm.
in the rapport building, right? Most of my clients now we do everything by video because we work around the world. Sometimes on rare occasion we meet face to face. but I need to figure out a way to know
Mhm.
you as a human being. And so in order to know you, I need to let you in to know me as well, right? For example, most of my clients know, for example, I've got grandchildren, right? Most of them know that I love rowing, right? Most of them know somewhat about my personal life, right? And so before I ask about your personal life, or if I ask about your personal life, then, I'm going to be willing to share my personal life as well. So we have a belief, Roy and I have had a belief that you don't have a work personality and a personal life personality. You have one personality. And the more you realize that the person I am outside of work is the person I am inside of work, the easier life
Mhm.
is, first of all. Okay. So when I meet you and you're my friend, I'm going to ask you about, hey, how was your weekend? What did you do this weekend? Or did you have
Mm.
some relaxation this weekend? Or how was your holiday? That kind of thing. And I'll freely share that as well. So I think it's a two-way street. Part of this also comes from the fact I'm older now than I was when I was selling when I was in my 20s or 30s or 40s for that matter. And as you get older, you tend to get more
Mm.
comfortable in your own skin, right? And it's easy for me to ask those kinds of questions and engage in that kind of dialogue with people. I always like to find, and I've always done this, is how do you find something in common with the
Mm.
person you're talking to, right? So it's like you're in Australia, right? And I go, oh yeah, I remember when I was in Sydney and I was there for 4 days one time working with BT, and I did this and I did that, and where do you live in relation to that, and et cetera. And you just connect in that way. So we think that sort of trust begins with an interest in the other person as a person and also the problem that they may be experiencing with their company. It's just a human being
Mhm.
over there. That's all. They may be in a sharp suit, or today, most people don't wear suits anymore, but they may look older, but they don't have it all figured out. They may have a more powerful position than you do, but it's just another person. They're just another human being trying to do the best they can, struggling along just like you do.
With your approach, you're really helping them think more deeply about their problems. Perhaps a harder question is, does this process force the salesperson to confront their own character flaws or weaknesses? And related to that, what would
Yeah.
you say you have discovered about yourself through helping others discover the truth about themselves?
Yeah. All of our personalities and our strengths and our weaknesses emerge out of our
Mm.
childhood. And we could have a really deep psychological conversation about that. But it goes deeply into Roy's work, which is transformative learning and change.
Mm.
That's what his PhD is in. Is how do you get human beings and organizations to transform? Okay. The things that I will talk a little bit about the psychology here, because everyone has had in their life about 4 or 5 years of absolute brilliance. And I bet you can't guess what those 4 or 5 years are. It's the beginning of
Mm.
a person's life. And it's because of how the brain is actually wired. Okay. And if you look at the radiography or slides of the brain, x-rays, where you can see the development of a very
Mm.
young child, infant, the wiring, because of course in the brain you have all these synapses and just like billions of these little nerve endings that basically touch each other like this. And if you look at the neural complex of very young children, there's very little that shows up in the brain. And then you look at it at a 3-year-old, and there's a lot more,
Mm.
and then a 4-year-old, and then a 5-year-old, and that pretty much the brain is just full of these neural complexes and these clusters. And literally, the brain is developing after the child is born and continues to develop as they learn. And as these synapses make these connections, then the retention of words and the motor skills and all of these things that develop from a early child, like my grandchild is 6 months old, right? Hasn't even begun to crawl yet, but is showing signs of it, right? And it's because the brain is continuing to develop. And what happens is up to the age of 5 or so, children have this part of the brain, which is the frontal cortex, is that this part of the brain hasn't wired up yet. And this is the part that is reflective. It's the part that looks at what's happened already to me and says, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's good or that's bad. That hasn't been wired up yet until
Mm.
about 5 years old. So small children live in the present moment, literally 24/7.
Mm.
They're not in the future. They're not ruing over the past. They're in the present moment. And I remember being in Singapore one time where I was in a hotel and I was looking out the window and it was raining. And there are these children down below and their parents, and the parents were all huddled under umbrellas. And the children were out in the rain, just joyful and playing and just in the moment, loving it. And that's the prime example of what's the difference between a brain that's been
Mm.
developed and one that hasn't. Because once the brain is developed, the adult human being spends more time in the future and the past than they do in the present.
Mm.
And children spend virtually almost all their time in the present
Yep.
moment, not in the future, not in the past. But at about 5, what happens is that part of the brain wires up, and then all of a sudden, the children then begin to develop their likes and dislikes, and their fears and anxieties begin at that point. Because I'll give you an example. So let's say in school, when I was a child, we used to have a time when the teacher would pass out paper and we would have crayons or paints or whatever, and it would be art hour, right? And so you'd paint your little painting or whatever it is. And here's Johnny, little Johnny, who's 5 years old, was painting the sun and like bold colors and a tree. It's a blot of
Mm-hmm.
paint. It's just very simplistic drawing. But across the aisle is little Alice, and she's actually very talented naturally as an artist. And she's drawing the Mona Lisa, right? Little Johnny looks at his art and then he glances over at her art and sees the difference. He goes, oh, I, I'm not very good at this. And then a well-meaning teacher comes along and looks at Johnny's artwork and goes, oh, that's very nice, Johnny. We keep going. That looks good. And then she turns to Alice. She goes, Alice, that's a masterpiece. You are a talented artist. And little Johnny hears that, and Johnny goes, oh, I'm not an artist.
Mm.
And that goes in very deeply. Okay. Now, why is this important? Is basically from the age of 5, even though we're about to go into the education system, people get narrower and narrower or dumber and dumber as they begin to see what they're good at, what they're not good at, what they like, what they don't like. And it's from their own experiences. And it's also from
Mm-hmm.
stimulus from the outside, like well-meaning teachers who all of a sudden say something that closed down that part of Johnny that used to love drawing pictures and bringing them home to mom and sticking them on the fridge. And then mom realizes
Mm.
Johnny's not doing that anymore. And she says, why are you not bringing the artwork home anymore? And he goes, that's for babies. I like doing math or whatever it might be. So that carries on into the adolescence years and into adulthood. And that's how all of a sudden you've got a salesperson who has fears and anxieties and worries about certain things, about how they present themselves in front of other people, et cetera, you say. So this attitudinal stuff
Mm.
is repairable, and we have a way of doing it. It's called rewiring. I don't have time to go into that today of how we do it, but rewiring is a way that you actually literally can rewire the brain, gain capabilities that you didn't believe you had before, or change habits,
Mm.
even deeply held habits that you've had for years, simply by going through a rewiring process of giving your brain new instructions of what you want it to
Mm.
do. Okay. So to answer your question, that's the background. To answer the question is that personal flaws or personal capabilities or personal likes and dislikes that interfere with or augment one's performance all
Mm.
come from childhood. 98% of it comes from childhood. And so therefore, what has gone in back there has to be dealt with later on in life. If a person is going to, for example, if a salesperson has call reluctance, okay, it's because of
Mm.
what's happened back there, right? And so therefore they're going to need to learn how to deal with the emotional and attitudinal parts that hold them back from making calls
Yep.
up here, you see, in the present moment, in the present day. Me and how I relate to my older customer is going to have a lot to do with how I related to my parents and other authority figures that were much older than me. And if those experiences were really got to a level of adult to adult, I'm going to have no problem with that. If it got to a point where I just always kowtowed to what my parents wanted to do, or elders or people around me, and I played up to them, that's the way I'm going to treat my customers later on in life. And there's lots of ways you can repair it, but it's the deeper psychology of a person that causes them to do what they're doing. That's the
I see.
root of it, you say. And it is changeable. You can change it if you
I
want to.
wonder if you can perhaps get a little bit granular because vulnerability is scary for many people and perhaps many executives. I'm just thinking of,
Yeah.
say, a hard charging chief revenue officer. How would you coach him or her to admit a blind spot without losing team respect, thereby deepening your relational trust?
Mhm. It would depend on where
Mm.
we are in the conversation. Okay. So are you saying that I'm selling to the chief revenue
Uh,
officer,
uh,
or have I been
You've been
hired by
hired
the
by the
chief revenue
company
officer?
to help with sales, and you're in a conversation with the chief revenue officer trying to address a blind spot that he or she has. But obviously, this is not something you want to do in
Sure.
front of the entire sales team. Otherwise, they lose team
No,
respect.
not at all.
How would you go about dealing with it, besides perhaps just having a one-on-one conversation in order to actually deepen that trust with the individual?
Yeah. I would definitely be peeling the onion open privately.
Yeah.
Okay. I would not ever do that in a public situation. Again, this is so contextual. It
Mhm.
depends on who's done the hiring. Okay.
Sure.
So let me set the scene. So let's say CEO was
Yeah.
the person who hired us. Okay. Immediately, the chief revenue officer, who arguably is the person who should have
Hmm.
straightened things out
Yeah.
already and not have to hire me. Right. So immediately on the front end, he may be on the defensive with me. And so one of the things that we always like to do in the selling process is not just sell to the CEO, but involve the chief revenue officer. Good example that I'm thinking about a company that we're working with down in Malawi right now. Okay. And we have a thing called a sales diagnostic that
Hmm.
is free on our website. People can do B2B or B2C. It's 25 questions that are yes, no. It takes 4 minutes to answer it. It measures sales performance in 5 areas,
Hmm.
or sales health, I should say, in 5 areas for a team, regardless of its size. And so we had the CEO take it, and we had the chief revenue officer, the equivalent of chief revenue officer, take it. And the CEO was looking at it, in almost all areas were deficient, right? The chief revenue officer took it, and almost all the areas were good or doing really good. So immediately you've got two people from two different perspectives, right? You know that there are some things that chief revenue officer is doing
Hmm.
that is not helping. Okay. Now, what we do is, or may not have the
Yeah.
capability to do, or may not see. So it's not always because people are idiots. Sometimes it's people
Hmm.
just lack the experience or lack the awareness to really know what to do, right? Everything that we do is always done on very profound discovery, and discovery comes in deep
Hmm.
listening and conversations. So, for example, in the selling process, I would have already had that interaction with the CRO, where I would listen to that person and say, look, everything we're talking about here is confidential. I'm not going to
Hmm.
report back to the CEO what you're saying, because that would destroy the trust between you and me. And yeah, there'd be nothing that
Hmm.
I could ever do with you. So the CEO has granted. That's why he told you that you could have an open, frank conversation with me. And that's true of everybody that we interview in an organization. We
Hmm.
just don't do that. We don't
Yeah.
reveal who said what. Right. But it's only through that sort of honest conversation do you ever get to the truth. So it starts there. And so in that first conversation, the CRO will tell me enough that I can believe certain things are absolutely true, or there's more to the story that we haven't talked about yet, but it's not the right time
Hmm.
to go for that depth. Then as we're contracted and we're hired, we know the areas that are the hot spots during the selling process. And then we go into a deeper discovery, and we do the same process again to be able to really open up these pain points and to really dig deeply in there. Sometimes we use psychometrics. We have something called a race survey, which measures attitude, competence, and execution based on self-assessment, observations, interviews, etc. And that discovery really helps us to understand what the state of things are. And then we'll enter into a training program with people to address all of these pain points. And then we get into coaching. Okay. So I wanted to set that context for how we would then interact with the CRO to address any behavioral or any knowledge gaps, et cetera. Okay. Now that he's gone through our training, now that he's gone through management training, all of that's done now. Now I have 6 or 8 sessions with him, you say. And so therefore we have something to build on. We have a common language now. We have a module that we teach that's very important about attitude, about everyone experiences a negative mindset of going down what we call going below the line multiple times in a day, for goodness sake, in a sales organization. And so as a former sales manager or chief revenue officer of my own organizations, I can speak to him. He knows that I know what his job is, right? And I'm able to ask questions or have conversation with him about sensitive topics. For example, I might say, let's take a look at how your team is performing, okay? And let's do an assessment of how the 4 people are doing, okay? And so we do what we call a race assessment, where the manager is thinking through, what's the attitude of the person? How do they bring themselves to work? What's their commitment level? What's their confidence level, okay? And then competence, and then their execution ability. And then I'll do that with them as well as a manager. Tell me about what are some of the challenges you have in attitude, like when you get the results that you get, okay? Competence, tell me about some of that, where you struggle as a manager. Tell me about execution. And that's an area that most managers really struggle. And a lot of times, chief revenue officers are people who've come up through the sales ranks, and oftentimes that's the case, come through the sales ranks and then are just put into a sales management position without any real training. And then they then have the whip to then drive the sales team to produce the numbers, right? And so there are some key differences between how salespeople operate and how sales managers operate. And sometimes it's the exact opposite, right? And the sales manager oftentimes finds they don't have the time to really get in and work personally with people because they're so distracted over here with all the other things that are put on their plate. And so one of the things we work with them on is, let's take a look at your time. How are you using your time? This is what's happening with that. Vinay, it's so situational. And that's how we enter into those tender conversations, is what's frustrating you the most? So it comes from them, not from me. Okay. And so I'll say to you, what do you want to talk about today? And one of the agreements I have with my coaching clients is I say, I need to know what you want to talk about 24 hours in advance of our call. So if we have a call at 4 p.m. today, I need to know 4 p.m. yesterday what you want to talk about. That's our agreement going into it, because I want you to come to the call having thought about what you want to talk about. It's not for me to prepare. It's about you preparing. So that's one. And I frame it up as, bring something that you're struggling with. Bring something that you need some support on, because I'm your closest friend in this situation, right? So after a person has gone through all those experiences that I described earlier, the person is either going to trust me or not trust me by the time we get to this point where we're going into the first coaching conversation, right? And the way we conduct our training is in such a way that people just really get that we're for them and that we're for helping that organization succeed, period. Okay. And so now all that setup then sets up the coaching to be something where a person is willing to be seen, because they've seen us in action enough that they know that we're not spilling the beans or blaming them or doing anything like that. They've seen enough of us and experienced enough of us to get there. Okay. And then we say, look, this agenda in coaching is your agenda. You bring whatever problem you've got and let's take a look at it. So I always know that when a problem comes to me, it's either going to present itself mainly as an attitude problem, mainly as a competence problem, or mainly as an execution problem. Okay. It's going to be one of those 3 that presents itself in the coaching conversation. So if a guy says, man, I'm just really frustrated with the performance of my team, I know I've got an attitude issue to deal with first. Okay. Or he might say, yeah, I'm feeling a bit frustrated because, my time, I just wasting so much time in meeting after meeting. So now I know it's an execution issue, you say, or it might be, I'm, I'm just feel like I'm just running in place here because I keep trying to get my manager to do something different, to think differently or to act differently, or I'm trying to get this person on my team. I think I've got them changed, and all of a sudden they're going back doing the same thing all over again. And it's just wearing me down. So now I know that I've got a competence issue of his ability to be able to move a person beyond some resistance or beyond some sort of a block that they're experiencing. You say, so then I know what to hone in on, but I also know that in virtually every case, attitude, competence, and execution are always at play. And so in other words, if someone says, and I know it's competence or execution, then I'll say something like, it sounds like people are really stealing your time quite a bit and you're allowing them to do it. So let's talk about that first. Is letting, what part of you is letting that happen? Okay. And how do you feel about that? So I can't do anything with competence or execution until I deal with the attitudinal block. So as a coach, I'm going to go right after attitude first. And I'm going to say, how are you feeling about that? I'm feeling frustrated. Okay. Tell me more about that. In fact, I'm working late at night trying to just catch up. And my wife is getting pissed off at me and I'm not sleeping well at nights. And then it's, what are you telling yourself? And I say, then I'll say, and I'll let them talk a little bit about it so I get a sense of it. I say, now we taught you a framework of above and below the line. From all that you've been describing to me, tell me, where are you with this? Are you above or below the line? And he goes, I'm below the line. Okay. All right. So what do we know about being below the line? Our job is to get above the line before we do anything, right? Before I open my mouth again, my job is to get above the line. Okay, great. Here, let me work with you to get you above the line quickly. All right. So we have a method. It's called split attention and then elevating. So we've taught them that in the class, but then we have to revisit it during coaching. So it'll take a few minutes, but we'll get them to come back above the line. And then they get back into taking full responsibility, not blaming the system, not blaming others, et cetera. They've taken full responsibility, and we get them into that level at least, and sometimes even into possibility. We have a diagram in our book that shows all that. But we get them into a level of possibility, and then now we can have a conversation about what's possible in competence and you say, whereas before I can't really help somebody whose attitude is below the line and is not believing that something's possible. So if that's the case, I need to move that first so that we can actually then see what's possible in the other two. Okay. So I don't know how to tell you what are the magic words, but I think it's the magic actions. And it's not even magic, it's actions. It's, do I do what I say I'm going to do as a coach or a consultant? Do I keep my word? Have I kept my word with you? And if I have, that's what builds that trust and openness. And let's say we're in a situation where I'm seeing something and he's not seeing it or she's not seeing it. I'll listen to them for a little while and I'll hear blame. No, I'm not below the line. And I'll say, okay, can I be blunt with you? Would it be okay if I tell you what I'm thinking? Because I think I might say some things that you may not want to hear. Are you okay with that? And by asking that permission, then I'm able to be direct. Now, when I'm direct with people like that, and it's not very often that I have to do that, but when I'm direct, always two things are true. There are two ways that I come at that. Number one, I do it directly with kindness. Be direct, but be kind.
Could you? Yep.
Don't be indirect. Don't beat around the bush. Don't say, sort of what I'm thinking is that you might want to kind of lighten up the way. Yeah, that's indirect. That's bull. Okay. Direct would sound like this. So Vinay, can I give you some direct feedback? Are you okay with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that a yeah or is that a okay? because I think what I'm about to say you might not agree with completely, or you may not want to hear all of it, but I want to have a real frank conversation with you. We've had several meetings in the times that I've been coaching you.
Sure.
I'm just role playing here, by the way. I'm not really saying this about you. And then I might say something like this. Look, what I've noticed is that you have been late 6 out of 6 times to our coaching sessions. And during the training, most of the sessions you came in late. And I think this is a problem for you. And I want you to stop doing that. I want you to stop wasting my time. Now, I don't know what's going on over there, but something's going on over there that causes you to be late. Then I'll just be silent. Ball's in their court. That's what being direct is about. You say, I've got evidence, and I'm doing that in a way where I'm not blaming him, or I'm just stating the facts and asking him to do something different. What's getting in the way of you being in time? Because I think it hurts. It's hurting your image, not just to me, but to your people. Because if you're doing it with me, you're doing it with your people. And if you're doing it with your people, you're doing it with your other people in the company. And that doesn't do your brand any good. So let's talk about what's happening. And now we're into it, right? See? And I care about your brand. That's what my job is, to care about your brand and your effectiveness as a leader, because that's what I'm here for, is to help you be more effective.
There's a lot of questions that
Sure.
are coming to mind, but
Yeah, there's a lot here in there to unpack. 50 years of career history.
if I'm not mistaken, one of the things you're actually helping people with is a fundamental leadership transformation. And again, thinking of salespeople, how would you get someone to shift their mindset from I need to be the smartest person in the room to I need to help others become smarter?
Yeah, that all comes with the
Okay.
training itself that we do with DQ training. And actually, we help people realize that being the smartest guy in the room and trying to prove that, it really can be a turnoff. And there is a way to do it in a different way. And that is when you use the DQ method, whether it's in a very simple sale, like in the developing world where we work, in the global South, where you're maybe working with smallholder farmers, or you're working with families that are considering buying a solar system for their simple solar lights for their home to replace kerosene, or put running water in near their home, et cetera. Or it's real complex business negotiations and a multi-million dollar, hundreds of millions of dollars. Is that your job is to help clients think more deeply, because that's what's going to help them see the need they have, understand the need they have, and then have urgency to act and actually buy from you. So what's really important is it's not the product that you're selling or the features and benefits that you have that are the number one thing that cause people to buy from you. It's who you are and how you conduct the selling process, how you engage with people. That's my ardent belief. Of course, there are going to be some people who buy because they like the product better than your product better than their product. But fundamentally, I think most of the time in today's really competitive landscape, especially in B2B, they're buying the person, because there's so many solutions out there that resemble each other. And I'm saying that very generally speaking, obviously, but I think I'm more true than not true, or that statement's more true than not true. So that means that how I conduct myself during the first meeting, second meeting, third meeting, fourth meeting is going to be really critical. It's fundamental to whether or not you're going to want to buy from me. And if I listen to you carefully, and because I listen to you carefully and I don't drill you with questions, drilling a person with questions causes more suspicion than trust. Okay. But if I listen to you using what we call precision listening, some people call it active listening, but precision listening and playing back to you what you say and taking notes in a certain way and using discussion documents and doing all the things that basically let the client know, look, I am listening to you, and our conversations are leading you to a deeper understanding and actually, quite frankly, a more concerned point of view than when we started. You're more concerned now about it because I've treated you in a certain way, led you to learn about your situation, not simply by saying, oh, I know about this and let me tell you about what your solution is, but by knowing I can use my knowledge to diagnose the challenges that you're facing. So I might even say at the end of a conversation, could I ask you a few questions? Okay. So I've listened for 45 minutes. So now I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about what you said over here. Would that be okay? Is this a good time? Okay. Yeah. I was wondering with your CRM, let's say if you're selling CRM software, with your CRM, have you thought about it as a sales planning tool? It sounds like you're really using it as a management tool to know how your people are performing so you have visibility of that. And you have good reason to have that, right? For lots of reasons. It informs the business and financial projections and operations and manufacturing and all that. So it's really important to have that. But have you ever thought about it? Is it being used as a sales planning tool? And at that point, the CEO might go, I don't know. The reason we put it in was because we wanted to have visibility of salespeople activity for the very reasons you said before. But I've never thought about it as a sales planning tool that we use proactively rather than reactively. At the end, proactively instead of at the end of the sales conversation where I update where we got to in the sales conversation. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm planning in advance and then I plan my next move. So by using our intelligence, our knowledge about our product and the area of expertise, I'm able to ask questions about the gaps I'm hearing, you see, or the space or the things that are not being talked about. Had you ever considered such and such, or had you ever thought about X being this way and Y being that way? Okay. All right. And it's not that you get into solution at that point. It's just by asking that question, oftentimes the person at the other side goes, I don't know the answer to that question. Or, ooh, that's a good point. I'd never thought about that before. So that's the way I would use my expertise. And sometimes you get into a situation where you don't know the answer to this. And the most important thing to do is not bluff your way out of it, but to say, that's a really good question. That's why we have sales engineers in our company. That's why we have product experts. And so what I'd like to do in our next meeting is to bring Tony, who is our product expert in that area, in, not to try to sell you our product, but to really help diagnose this gap really effectively that I just don't have the expertise in. You see, and that's okay. That's where you can show your vulnerability and declare why it's vulnerable. It's a highly technical thing you're asking. And my specialty is client relations and sales, and we have a team behind me that help deliver the technical stuff.
Again, from a sales point of view, would you say that you're also helping salespeople within an organization find purpose and meaning beyond just hitting numbers?
Oh, absolutely. We do something called an AIM plan. That's one of the things we install within every organization. And the AIM plan will look at the goal, like what are your goals, or what are the targets that have been given to you? And hopefully the targets have been bottom up as opposed to top down. I believe very strongly in that. Most time it's top down. But even in a situation where it is top down and you've been given a target, you'd better find a way to either push back and get that changed if you think it's not really quite right, or you need to get behind that target and be completely and fully committed to hitting that target. Okay. And it's so important to get full commitment to get on a trajectory to hit that target. Whether you hit the target or you don't hit the target is less important. But when you when you commit to it, it creates a new trajectory. You thought you were going to go for that, but you actually need to go for that. It's like a moonshot. It's like Kennedy back in 61 or 60, he said, we're going to go to the moon and back by the end of the decade. All the NASA engineers pretty much all fainted at that point. We don't have the technology. It hasn't been invented yet. But because you have this lofty goal, once you commit to it, and they're committed because the president said it, when they're working for the president, once that's there, that's when innovation happens. That's when, that stretch target says, we can't get there by continuing to do what we've always done. We got to think innovatively, he said. So it starts first with a commitment, and that commitment always comes back to purpose. Okay. So the way we look at it is this is the goal. that I'm going for. And by the way, this is personal too. You can also do personal goals. My goal is to have a house, to earn enough money by the end of the year to build a new room in my house, or to buy a house, or whatever it might be. And I've got a weight loss goal or a fitness goal of such and such. That's also a goal that can be part of that. And you remember the whole human being, not the personal life, professional life. So you set the goals, and then what are some key objectives right now that align directly with those goals? Key objectives are things that you're doing, objective activities that you're doing that will align with that goal and actually have a chance at delivering that goal or surpassing that goal. And then underneath that is the next question is, now, why do I want to do this? Okay. And it's literally, this is how the AIM plan works. I want to hit such and such a goal. I want to hit X goal. You say the goal because I want what? Independence. I want to earn my commission. I want to earn my bonus this year. Okay, great. And I want to earn my bonus because, and you're literally writing this out. Okay. You don't do it just in your head. You want to write it out. Okay. And I want to hit my bonus because I want to be in good standing with my company, and I want to take a nice vacation to Hawaii with my wife and save the rest of the money. I want to have this money to go to Hawaii and save this money because, and then you go for the next layer down, you see. And after about 3 statements, all of a sudden you're into a place where you really have to think inside yourself, why do I want that? I want that because it's the kind of person I am. I stretch for goals. I do what other people think is not possible. Now, once you get words on that, then all of a sudden you ask the next question, which is, and I want to do things that stretch me and frankly impress other people, that I actually can do things that they can't do because I want to move up in my company. I want people to respect my work and the quality of that work because I want to be promoted. And I want to be promoted because that comes with a higher salary package. It means that I can build a bigger house, have a nicer home for my family. And I want that because when I was a kid, we struggled and we had a 2-bedroom apartment, and I want to have a home with a pool and guest house. And I want that because now, how are you feeling about your target that you were blown away by? How do you feel about the goals that you're going for that you're a bit scared about? Waking up in the morning thinking about the goal and how difficult it is? Or are you thinking about that house with the pool and the guest house and the kids that are going to the school that they want to go to? Now I'm connecting to my deeper purpose and deeper meaning that drives really consistent, high performance behavior. And my advice is that every manager learn how to do this for themselves, but also learn how to do this with their people, and to do this once a week. Once a week. It's one of the things we look at when we go to places all around the world, whether it's B2B, B2C, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. It's just, there's a few more zeros behind the number. That's all it is. Whether it's a big telecoms here in the UK or an organization in Rwanda selling toilets, it really truly is the same thing. I know because I've seen both of them. Some sales take a few more months to close, but it's still the same process. But one of the mistakes I see managers make is they don't make time for their people. And my job as a manager, my number one job, it might look like delivering the number. Yeah, that's important to the company. Absolutely. But my number one thing that I need to do is to make sure my people are taken care of, and that they're developed and they're skilled and they're on target and they're above the line. And the only way I'm going to do that is if I meet with them frequently and work with them closely within enough time to do that. And if my employer is not giving me that time and I can't persuade him to do it differently, then find another employer who will. Because that may be some bold words, but seriously, a sales manager working with salespeople needs time to develop those salespeople. if you're truly going to have a high
Mm.
performing sales organization. And quite frankly, it doesn't matter if it's insurance or IT or whatever it might be. Get someplace where you're able to be the kind of manager that you want to be, earning the kind of money that you want to earn, and having the kind of impact that you want to have. Okay. So we work with companies to say, look, your sales managers are meeting with their people. I'm thinking of a large telecom we worked with, literally only on a 6-month basis to do half year reviews. And I look at that and I go, that just isn't enough. It needs to be every week. And if it can't be every week, then every other week at a minimum. And if you can't deliver that, you're just gonna have a revolving door of
Yeah.
poor performers. And so people deserve your time, and it needs to be about an hour a week. And you need to help people to develop deep purpose for what they're going for. This is one of the things that I never forget. There's a really good little booklet called The Common Denominator of
Mm.
Success. You can get it online. Okay. Common Denominator of Success. Just go and put it in the search. And it's a speech that was given by a guy named Albert Gray back in the 1940s at a big life insurance conference. Okay. And it's such an impactful little 12-page booklet. I think it ends up being about maybe 3 pages
Mhm.
long, the speech in an A4. But in there, it's all about the common denominator of success is about attitude and purpose. Okay. And it says, this is one of the quotes, direct quotes. I've read it so many times over the years. 50 years ago, I began reading it. But, and may I remind you, managers, that when one of your star performers falls into a slump, the less you talk about his slump and the more you talk about his purpose, the faster he's going to get out of his
Mm.
slump, period. And really, the common denominator of success is that successful people form the habits of doing the things that unsuccessful people
Mhm.
don't like to do. And it's not that successful people like to do those things. It's that they're willing to do those things so that they can get what they want, so that they can be successful. So successful people are willing to do the things that unsuccessful people aren't willing to do. Not because they want to, but because
Mm.
they choose to. And that's a message that in sales needs to be remembered over and over and over again because it's such a hard job. Otherwise, it's not, I really feel sorry for people who've gotten into sales and into companies or organizations where it's just about the numbers because those people typically just don't stay in sales. They get run through the system and they go, I'm not good at sales. Okay. I wish everyone had the sales experience that I'd had with the company that I had, who believed in me, who trained me, really well, who put me with a manager who was inexperienced,
Mm.
but he cared about me. And I knew that. And that I was constantly fed stuff that helped me get my mind about what
Mm.
my job was about. And that has affected me very deeply as a human being and who I am today. And it's also affected me very deeply in what I do or what I did with building my sales organizations over the years and my companies over the years. And certainly what I do now for the last 17 years in helping other people build their companies. Now, a lot of these guys are very young entrepreneurs and they don't know that this is what you do to build a great company. You need to build a fabric, a culture of care and high performance. They go
Yeah.
together.
Interesting point there, and thank you for sharing that. And I'm thinking about what you've done over the years, people you've impacted through your work, from installing latrines in Cambodia to transforming corporate sales teams. What would you say would be the legacy that you would like to leave behind? And how does that bigger purpose inform the way you approach client relationships today?
Yeah. It's really the heart of our business, and the heart of our business is out of the hearts of Roy and myself. And that is, we want to stamp out bad selling worldwide. We want to create a different genre of sales. That sales is not about me convincing you to buy from me. But my job is to help you make the best possible decision you possibly can about your situation. And if that means buying from somebody else, I'm okay with that. Okay, I really am. If what I have for you isn't right, or if I'm not right for you, none of that's going to work out very well. And that goes for not just selling a product, but it's also being a manager, working with a team of people. It's all the same thing. It's problem led. It's what's the problem you're trying to solve, and can I help you solve that problem? Can I help you see that the problem you're struggling with as a salesperson is really getting in your way? And let's really peel this apart so you can see what I'm seeing. Because it's not important that I see it, it's important that you see it. Because once you see it, you can do something because you have the motivation to want to do something.
Right.
So I would say that so that's my ardent desire. And the world's a big place, so it's going to be difficult to get to everyone. But when you start seeing your stuff popping up in other people's posts, when you start seeing little cartoon videos popping up on TikTok, or on one of the guys that we've worked with for years was holding a session in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And it was a video on YouTube, on LinkedIn. And here he was teaching some of the stuff that we do to a group of people. Familiar? And I was going, that's pretty good. Pretty good job. And that's what we want. And that's why we wrote our books. And we want people to get this stuff. And if there's videos, and our website's got all kinds of stuff on it, from testimonials to, there's a book we wrote a couple of years ago called Stop Doing Stupid. Okay. In fact, it was our first book. And it was geared toward organizations and basically managers. Stop doing things that don't work and try this instead. And so we didn't publish that book, but we made 28 short videos, 2-minute videos on the topic. And then the written material is then presented. It's free. Wow. It's all on our website. People can tap into that. It helps to dispel some of the myths about conventional wisdom around selling, and conventional sort of faults is what I would say around selling and sales management. And that's really what we want to do, is we want to educate the world on that's one way to do it. But if it's not working, why don't you try this instead?
Last question, and then we'll wrap up here. If I were, say, to give you 5 minutes with a struggling sales team, and you could only share one principle that would transform how they build trust with customers, what would you say? Because sometimes I think the most profound truths are the simplest ones.
Yeah. If I were to share one thing, is show your customers that you care. Okay. Because I remember there was a guy who was a very successful organization builder in the state of Kentucky in the United States, and also in other states as well. And he made millions of dollars a month in what he did, okay, in the insurance business through a team of about 150 salespeople. And Bob, his sort of quote was, people don't care about how much until they know how much you care. And that sort of goes back to your question a bit earlier about being the one in the room who has all the knowledge, okay? What really matters is that you care and you're interested. And so that naturally leads to curiosity and genuine interaction with people. And that's the beginning of trust. And so you find out a person's situation first before you try to pitch something into it that you don't really know if they need. And so care enough to learn, care enough about the individual you're talking to, whether it's a B2C or B2B, it doesn't matter.
Scott, this has been fantastic. A lot of questions are coming up, but we do have a time limit on this, so we'll end it here.
Yeah, is anyone still listening?
There's plenty of meat in the podcast. I'm sure people will enjoy it. Once again, your books are available on Amazon and other major retailers. One of them is Sell
Well, Do Good.
And the other.
Sell Well, Do Good is the other one is Decision Intelligent Selling. So Decision Intelligent Selling is the book that is more geared toward a Western B2B environment. And Sell Well, Do Good is the same technology with just some minor tweaks that's geared toward the global South and social enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing, but just with B2B, you have multi-stage or multi-step selling a lot of times. And in B2C, it tends to be more of a
Mm-hmm.
one-call close. And so there are going to be some differences there and in the application and also in the stories as well. The stories in the decision intelligence selling, what we call the blue book, are all B2B in the Western, set in a Western context, whereas the orange book, which is decision intelligence, or excuse me, Sell Well, Do Good, both of these are on the website. They can learn a bit more about each book. And our website is wrpartnership.com. And there's a whole host of different things on there that people can poke around
Certainly.
and get lost.
We'll
So
include links to that in the show notes. Scott, once again, thank you. Thank you
great.
for doing
Thank you.
this.
Thank you.
No worries
All
at
right.
all.
Thank you very much.
Scott,